Here is a book by Daisetz, and the title is about the mushin. Mushin, mu is empty, shin is mind, so no mind. It's a book, and I have a copy which is what I want to read. That was part of the Zenshu, all the collection of his work. He's talking about muhumbetsu, which means no thinking, basically, and the relation to thinking. And I mentioned about the state of absolute, being absolute, which correspond to this idea of no thinking, but at the deepest level, where the state point that there's nowhere to go, but being in the state of absolute, which is the nature's way. So it's like the core of our being, and when you have no thinking and no self filtered into levels deeper into your consciousness, it's almost like touching the unconsciousness, because there's no language, the word and logic, mind is empty. So the talk here is relating to the empty mind or unconscious, related to conscious or state of thinking. And there's that delicate work that happens in that boundary. And he's talking first about the unconscious part, or the state of absolute being, where there's no mind, but you are still there. There's no you, but the mind is so calm and quiet, and you get to that level. And that level, nothing bothers, because you are one with the universe, the way of the universe, and you can call that, and have the sensation of aliveness, pointing the blissful sensation that you are touching the core of your being. So that's muhumbetsu, no mind, unconscious, being in the state of unconscious, deep samadhi. And the Sila Samadhi Panya, the Panya is wisdom, comes out of the unconscious part, or Samadhi at the deepest level. But this book is the angle from the Zen, and when I talk about the Sila Samadhi Panya, that's also Zen, because it's Buddhist idea of being awakened at the state of no mind. It's the experiential wisdom that we can come to. But without awakening, you can also relate to that, is my view. Why I say that? Because just like I mentioned about ideas pop up every now and then, and forgotten thing can be discovered, or the word that I forgot pops up all of a sudden when I'm not thinking. So it's kind of like a shallower level of the samadhi, but just imagine it goes deeper and deeper and deeper, and you are into this total silence in your mind, still feeling that vibration, the nature's way prevailing, as some sort of a sensation. And when that touching of that deepest level, then something happens to be awakened. And that's the awakening. If you seek for it, you cannot find it, because it's a nature's way. Seeking is your mind doing the job. So that's the paradoxical relationship, but we have to understand that as it is. One is the human, the other one is the nature's way. Human's way has artificial, nature's way has no artificial. So you let go of the artificial, you go back to the Garden of Eden, and then everything as it is at the absolute level of being. But human being a human, we may experience that, but we come back using the mind. But when we use the mind, we see the gap, because sometimes that using the mind is delusionally. So when the delusionally mind is taken care of by the samadhi and the panya or the wisdom to come out, there's that unconscious being conscious, aligned to the way of nature, so to speak. So the human is still human, but we have this spark, I guess that's the one, Eckhart talked about, is the connection that happens. And Daisetz's explanation of Satori is grabbing the live wire, which I can relate to. Live wire is the energy. And that energy just explode, spread out, and all the human residue of the worries and the suffering goes away. Because there's none of that human thing at the level of the way of nature. But human being a human, that paradoxical, or paradoxical relationship, it's something that bothers, and that's the reason why I have so many underlined, red mark and comment here and there in these 2 pages that I must have looked at years ago. I just found it and I thought, oh, this is interesting, and that I thought I would just mention, because of the things that I have been talking about. It's absolute level of being and the Eckhart and the non-duality, things of that nature, which is that unconscious part of the world become conscious, so to speak. Awakening happens. So going back to the book of Daisetz, when that muhumbets, no thinking, get to that absolute level of being, then you have that experience. And that experience may be explained as it's like the iron without hole, meaning you have nowhere to touch or play with. So it's absolute non-duality. But I don't like the word non-duality because if you use the word non-duality, it becomes like a conceptual discussion of philosophy that doesn't go anywhere unless experiential backup being there. So don't fool ourselves thinking that you understand and get it, but it's not getting it, just playing with the words and logically explaining. AI can do that, but AI cannot experience it. It's just manipulating with algorithm, but the human has the connection because we are the living being, and the living being based upon the way of nature. That's the miracle, I keep saying, and that miracle has to be experienced, not living in the conceptual world and think that's the end of it. And that is the bullshit, is to basically some of the Zen people may say. And that, of course, it's not pride. But anyway, that's the discussion about absolute state of being or unconscious and the iron without hole, because that's what it's, nothing you can touch on. And when that experience is given, out of that, then the consciousness, human thinking start to happen. And then we need to figure out how that relationship is manifesting. So if it just comes out, it doesn't do any good in the human world. And for the human world to benefit or to have this alignment of the conscious to unconscious or state of absolute being coming up with a dualistic space in the human language, the wisdom, that is the second level of the awakening, so to speak, or second level of realization, which is the reason why we use the word wisdom. There's something behind it that is not just the ordinary logic, but there's some substance behind it. And that comes from this connecting to the root, absolute state of being. That's what he's talking about. So when we can say that there's that iron plate or iron without hole, the reason why we can say that is that this is based upon the secondary realization of what that experience was. And out of that comes the compassion. And that is the part here that I have the black mark in the center part of it. And that's what I said about the compassion comes out. And that's what he's talking about. He doesn't say wisdom come out, but he's basically pointing that too by saying that because compassion and wisdom is connected to each other. It's like a flip side of the coin, but that's another story. Or say that the compassion is more of a emotional, feeling related, and the wisdom is more of the intellect related. So the human feeling and intellect can have the relationship, connection. If I think about the neurons connecting to each other in between the right and left brain, there's that realization that happens. And that's relating to the Gilbert Taylor's video that I shared. But that's another interesting story. But the point, what is being discussed is there. So when we have the experience and get that explanation, including this one that Daisetz is talking, it's kind of like obvious, but it's not obvious until you taste the chocolate. You don't know the taste of the chocolate, actually, but just conceptually imagining. But again, we have the layers of samadhi. Therefore, the taste of chocolate may not be as chocolate-like, but we have a sweet taste and like a nectar taste or some such thing that we can feel. And that's, to me, is quite good enough or profound if we get to that clarity or understanding, because we were driven by that force of the universe, and we are smelling or feeling and picturing. Yes, there's that liveliness that can come when I do this, and there's the feeling of I'm doing I really like, connected to my heart, and that's the sensation in the typical our language. So he's talking from the Zen experience, so he's very kind of strict, but I'm just modifying it or relating to what level and what's the symptom and what it is and what it means. So let me just continue. So with that experience of being absolute, no mind, no self state of deep samadhi, when you come back, because you are human, so you use the brain and you don't just sit forever. But if you can sit forever, and some people may wish to do it because that's kind of blissful and you may be there all the time, and that may be the end of it. But the Mahayana idea is you come back and bring that compassion and do the work. And when you do the work, you go away from that absolute sense of being, except there's a connection to it, and keep realizing it and act upon that basis. So that's basically the point. So he's pointing, I also mentioned this word. When you have the awakening, it maybe felt like sitting alone on your own on top of the mountain. Dokuza Daiyuho is in Japanese. Sitting alone, Dai is big, Yuho is a big mountain. Sitting alone. But if you are just that without coming back to that conscious level, then what's the point of it? There's no use of it. Of course there's no use because it's nature's way. So the use you think about is the human world. But as human world, we don't want to keep having the suffering or making stupid mistake and get lost. So we want to use the brain and listen to the heart. That's what I say. And when you come back from that absolute state to the human state, so to speak, from nature's way to human way, there's that duality existing, and there's good and bad, and right and wrong, existing and non-existing. Such world will be realized. So it's just like a one page that I talked about, but I think that may give us some kind of a perspective what we are talking about. So obviously, I look at this many times because of so many red lines and stuff that is on this page. But it's just that. We are living, having the new information causing some hurdles that we can overcome, and we try to find out the way to pass that. So the way relating to what I talked about is that, okay, we have the suffering that's in the duality, good and bad and all that, things happening. Okay, notice that and go into samadhi, no mind, no self, and go deeper to get to the absolute level, absolute state of being, and silent. Then there may be a way. There may not be. When it comes back, we may go back to this state of unresolved sense, or unresolved but just observe and accept and be with it. Being experience the core of our being, whatever is the wave in front of us is just that. And there's a compassionate feeling of feeling the pain of the people or yourself, but that is in the mind. So paradox as it is to realize is to resolve the paradox, because that's the nature's way and the human way, and alignment or the expression of the compassion may arise, and the pain may be felt, but you can also digest as a way of the universe, being silent, accept, and possibly, without knowing, as much as we are alive with this miracle of event happened, to be alive here, now, that connection to the root may provide us no guarantee to find a way going forward. I mentioned Einstein's quote that life is to be lived and it's like a bicycle. You have to keep riding. So you don't just sit in the mountain and the big mountain on the top alone, but keep riding and going back and forth and relating to what's important and what's fake to find a way and keep working on it. That's basically the message. And I think I mentioned about the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu, pointing the same thing about the duality and how you go beyond things of that nature. Thank you.